They are accusing Democrats of saying we spend too much. For anyone that wants to entertain that thought, I ask you to think about the last time a person has said in this country that the government does too much for them, that their Social Security check was too high, that teachers are paid too much. When was the last time anyone has heard or seen that?
This was one of those House floor moments that just slices right through the Washington BS. They always trot out the same tired line. Nobody complains about government doing too much. Nobody. Every single time I hear that, I'm like, seriously? What country are you people living in? Because right there on the floor, AOC stands up, full confidence, and declares that Americans are basically begging for more spending, more programs, more bureaucracy jammed into their daily lives. And then Congressman Chip Roy grabs the mic and does something you almost never see in Washington anymore. He says the quiet part out loud. There's an old proverb that goes, when government grows too big, freedom shrinks quietly. What happened next? Wasn't quiet at all. Hit subscribe right now. Because this is one of those raw, reality check moments where the polished talking points get smacked square in the face.
Another quote. President Biden already lowered the deficit by $1.7 trillion. They say his budget would cut the deficit by another $3 trillion by eliminating wasteful spending on big oil and pharma, we're told. But it is in fact our Democratic colleagues who prefer to maintain their massive subsidies for the elites and the wealthy in their so-called Inflation Reduction Act just last year. My friend from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, said, quote, I ask you, think about the last time a person has said in this country that the government does too much for them. When was the last time anyone has heard or seen that? I'll say it. I'll say it right here. I don't want the government doing most of the things that the government is doing to interfere with the ability of the American people to carry out their lives. Federal, state, and local. When was the last time you had a bureaucrat show up and you said, oh joy, thank you, I'm really glad there's a bureaucrat here? When was the last time you were thankful for $32 trillion in debt, $100,000 almost for every man, woman, and child in America? Anybody thankful for $32 trillion in debt? Anybody? Anybody thankful for a border that's wide open being exploited by cartels while fentanyl comes in and kills our children? Everybody thankful for that Department of Homeland Security that doesn't actually secure the homeland? Everybody thankful for an FBI that went after Scott Smith and labeled him a domestic terrorist for daring to defend his daughter in a school board meeting because she was assaulted in a bathroom? Anybody thankful for the IRS knocking on your door, auditing the poor and the minorities 3 to 5 times more? People thankful for that? Are you thankful for the EPA or the Department of Interior that sent a man to prison because he had some ponds on his ranch in Montana? We have a government that is weaponized against the American people and is undermining our liberties, and they want more of it. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle want more government. They want more taxes. They want more spending. They want more bureaucrats knocking on your door.
Massive amount of battery production. And by all indication, the vast majority of that Congo production is controlled by China. A huge amount of that has child labor and other issues that we've talked about. And you got trafficked child slaves that are reported in the production of it. Why on earth would we want to limit the ability of Americans to go mine cobalt? Now, I might say, well, that's kind of great because I actually still want the internal combustion engine. I actually think it's more affordable and better for the American worker who wants the plumber in San Marcos, Texas to be able to go to work and afford the car. But if you buy into the motion of having, EVs that you can drive all over creation, even if you're from Texas and you had to do like I did, I appreciate the chairman pointing out the passing of my grandma. I had to drive 6 hours, like 300 miles to go see my grandma Thursday before she passed away, and 6 hours back. I couldn't do that at an EV. I wouldn't be able to make the round trip in time. But okay, assume we were able to ever produce batteries that last long enough, the charging stations, all the stuff. Why would we get rid of the American production of it?
Thank you. There are several different components to your question. I want to make sure that I address them. First and foremost, on the issue of child exploitation, child labor. I think it is the role of the United States for us to push back forcefully on this production, and not just in the production of energy, but across the board. We see this in textile production, energy production, cobalt mining. It is horrific, and we need to make sure that our sources do not include child labor. But to get to the core of the question, too, on the China front, is that I find it interesting that there is this concern about Chinese ownership of minerals, and it is legitimate. However, the response to that seems to be deregulation specifically for companies that are largely Chinese-owned here in the United States. These companies are subsidiaries where the benefit of what we are deregulating here, and I'll give you a specific example. I would be remiss not to mention that the minerals produced specifically at the proposed Twin Metals mine that is implicated in this legislation would most likely be shipped to China for refining and smelting to be sold on the global market. These are not American-owned companies that American mined minerals would be going to. And so if your concern is the Chinese predominance of ownership in the mining market, I would be very concerned about passing this legislation. So that, I think, on the China piece there. And lastly, on the meeting our targets and mining cobalt. I think it's a false choice to say that in order for us to mine cobalt, we either have to destroy some of the most sacred lands in the United States or rely on child labor. There's responsible mining in the United States that is available to us. But secondly, I also find it interesting that the majority presently pushes back against battery recycling, which would allow us to open the path to reducing our reliance on mining in general. There is enormous potential in recycling many of these EV batteries, but we have not made the investments or the shifts necessary in order to unlock that so that we can reduce our reliance on solely mining as the only source of battery. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. Before I give my colleague a chance to respond, as I think he probably wishes to, I would only note that happy to have a conversation about restricting Chinese ownership of any number of corporate activities in the United States, or ownership of farmland, or ownership of land near military bases, or frankly, ownership of meat packing, production, including mineral production and so forth. A significant reason why it would be mined here and shipped back is because they've got all the production facilities, because they've been building and mining these, because they've got the resources to do that. And here we've got the God-given benefit in America being able to produce very clean burning natural gas, very efficient ability to have automobiles that have an internal combustion engine, which are basically fractionally about a 1.5% of the CO2 production when you compare it to what we're producing in China, as the gentleman noted, where they've got 1,100 coal-fired plants burning in China, and we have 250, and they're building 2 a week, and we're building none. And yet we're building no nuclear plants except for the Georgia plant that was finally put online 45 years after it was permitted by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So I think if we're going to be serious about it, we can't say, I just don't accept the premise that this sort of general notion of, well, we got to push back on the child labor. Well, I mean, we're going to use that child labor unless we find a supply right now, because the Biden administration has put their foot on the gas to say we must have EVs in 2030 at the extent of 2/3 of our entire production line. So Toyota is not a Chinese-owned company, but Toyota has a massive production facility in San Antonio. Tells me that they will largely have to put their entire assembly line starting next year into EVs pretty much only, because they can't financially afford to do otherwise with these mandates on the tailpipe rule, which will be shutting down the internal combustion engine production of the Toyota vehicles. No Chinese ownership there, because that's where they are, which will then mandate the EVs, driving up the price of those vehicles. And then they got to go figure out how to get the batteries and get the production. I know the gentleman seemed like he wanted to jump in on that, and so I'd like to give him a chance to respond.
I appreciate the opportunity to respond. So many things to talk about here, and I agree with the...
Picture the scene. AOC wraps her speech, dead serious, saying flat out, nobody thinks the government does too much. Nobody thinks spending is too high. Nobody complains about Washington sticking its hands into their lives. I'm watching this thinking, are you kidding me? Chip Roy steps right up. No hesitation, no fluff, and drops the line that completely shatters the whole narrative. I don't want the government doing most of the things it's doing. Boom. That one sentence takes everything from abstract theory to gut-level truth that millions of Americans live every damn day. He doesn't stop there. He barrels straight through the facts like a freight train. $32 trillion in national debt. Nearly $100,000 hanging over the head of every man, woman, and child in this country. Simple, brutal question. Is anyone actually thankful for that? The silence in the chamber answered louder than any comeback ever could. Is anyone thankful for a wide-open border while cartels flood fentanyl that kills our kids? Is anyone thankful for a Department of Homeland Security that somehow can't secure the homeland? Is anyone thankful when the IRS audits the poor and minorities at higher rates than almost anyone else? That's the call in the progressive argument. They love talking about the people, but what they really mean is the government acting on the people, expanding, regulating, spending, controlling. Roy flips the script hard and lays bare the ugly reality. Federal agencies weaponized, unaccountable, ballooning in size and power, while regular families drown under debt, inflation, and endless overreach. This moment wasn't fireworks or screaming matches. It wasn't emotional theater. It was cold, clear, unflinching. A straight-up reminder that liberty doesn't vanish in some dramatic overnight coup. It gets chipped away, regulated, taxed, bureaucratized, quietly, until one day you wake up and it's gone. Chip Roy just refused to let that quiet slide anymore. He said what so many feel, but rarely hear spoken on that floor. And that's exactly why it landed like a hammer. If you're fed up with the endless spin and want more breakdowns, where reality actually wins the argument, smash that like button, drop in the comments, did Roy just voice what you've been screaming inside? And subscribe so you're locked in for the next one. We're just getting started. Catch you in the next breakdown.